Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. It is June 25th, 2024, and hopefully you're in a warm place because the majority of the people listening to this are probably in summertime. But it doesn't mean that you're not on the other side of the ocean. And that means that you did seasons are reversed and hopefully you got some hats, jackets, and gloves. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, we'll get on some housekeeping and we'll definitely get on to the good stuff. So mspinitiative.com. Here is pretty much where we park mostly everything that we do. For example, this very session is being recorded. You will find it on our podcatcher, YouTube page, and mspinitiative.com under sessions, both in audio and video format. Like, subscribe, share, forward, all that good stuff. You know what to do. Then we're running MSP Community Minds. This is our second one of the year. We did our first one in Nashville. Next one's coming up in Denver, September 25th and 26th. It's actually where we ran the original MSP Community Minds back last year. This is a completely educational event. You'll see the agenda is posted, including all of our MSP panelists. That's right, people like you came out of the trench in their office to kind of tell you what works and what doesn't work. And then we have some experts from around the industry to help teach you something, not sell you something. Actually, 2-hour workshops, more or less, on various topics. You should definitely check it out and come by, learn something. Oh, and by the way, did we tell you that if you actually show up, it costs you nothing because this event is absolutely free to you, other than actually getting there, which we know, the cost of traveling. But if you like bicycling and walking, then I guess it won't cost you anything other than some time. So come see us in Denver, September 25th, 26th. Then we have probably what we're most famous for, the MSP community block parties. We have multiple. We have, I think, 5 or 6 coming up for the rest of the year. First, IT Nation Australia. If you're coming to IT Nation in Sydney next month in August, I believe it's the last week of the month, join us on August 21st, and we will be doing a block party for the first time. I think it's technically the second time. We just didn't call the first one a block party. In Sydney and Darling Harbor. Sign up, register, absolutely free for MSPs to attend. Whether you're going to IT Nation or not, if you're an MSP, please join us if you're in the area. Behind that, we will be taking our boat and our plane and our cars across the ocean once more to Germany, Berlin. We're going to be doing PAX 8 Beyond Berlin. This will be October 14th. Venue to be announced, but we were just out there last week and a lot of good options that we're coming through right now. We're excited for that one. It's right after Oktoberfest. If you didn't know, Oktoberfest actually ends in September. I know, weird that they call it Oktoberfest. It is what it is. Then we got DattoCon, Kasei DattoCon in Miami. Okay, so we were here last year, coming back again this year. So if you're headed to DattoCon Miami, October 29th, we will be doing a block party on South Beach, but probably on property. This actually helps because South Beach is kind of like Vegas, right? You may not actually get past the venue. Then we have ConnectWise IT Nation, the big one in Orlando. This is where we have our radio recognizable band. 2 years ago, All American Rejects. Last year, the combination of Better Than Ezra, Sugar Ray, and Tonic. This year, to be announced. So check it out. This will be the first day of IT Nation in Orlando. And then, as if we don't like airplanes enough, we'll be getting on an airplane and closing out the year in November, back again in Sydney, literally at the same hotel as IT Nation will be DattoCon Sydney on November 12th. Different venue for our party, but same conference hotel. I guess the wires got crossed and they just didn't talk to each other. Also on mspinitiative.com, you'll see community offers. Take advantage of them, and a community calendar, which is every event that we know about going into the end of the year. So if you really don't want to be at home or working, plenty of places to find yourself. All right, so that's everything at mspinitiative.com. Check it out. And that is all of the housekeeping. Today is our first time guest on the show, David from Avanon. I think Avanon, fellow PAX 8 marketplace vendor, also Checkpoint Company, if that name rings a bell. I was just with some checkpointers out in Dublin last week at an event, actually. So small world, I guess. How you doing today, David?
Yeah, doing great, George. Doing great.
Well, welcome to the show. I hear that you're down under. That's why I had to not exclude the people down on the other side of the ocean. We love those guys and you guys. So as you can see, we keep on visiting your very, very large island in the ocean.
It's a great place to come visit. Looking at some of the places where you've got the parties planned for later in the year. I'm very familiar with some of those places. Cargo Bar in I think you said September
Yeah.
after IT Nation. That's a good place right there in Darling Harbour. So you guys are gonna have a lot of fun.
We definitely want to make sure that we didn't go to bad places. I know when we were checking out venues in Darling Harbor, like we were just like, well, the wax place probably doesn't work out too well. And there's a zoo right next to it. And apparently the animals like to sleep. We're like, well, how about we just stick to a venue that actually serves alcohol on the regular? So that's where we ended up.
Yeah, look, I think the key thing if you're going to have host a party in Australia, just do the check for snakes and spiders. You'll be fine.
That's a thing. That's a real thing. Yeah. Snakes and spiders. Well, like just make sure before you flush, you just take a look and see what's in there.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably better before you sit down, but.
There you go. That's a good tip for anybody that hasn't been over to the other side. So, for anyone that doesn't have never has never talked to you, David, maybe a little bit about your background and how you got to where you got to, and then we'll get into the company as well, Avanon. For people who don't even know what Avanon is or does, we can get into that too. So, you tell us where you want to start.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I suppose starting off with a little bit about me. I'm actually, when it comes to working for a vendor, I'm actually a bit of a newbie in this space. So I've been with Checkpoint Avanan for a little over 2 years. Prior to that, I actually worked for an MSP and I spent my entire career working for MSP. So if you go back to kind of 2007, 2008, I left high school. When I left school, I went and worked for a family business as a technician, running data cables, installing phone systems, installing internet, and that just kind of progressed from there. So I got in from working with telecommunications and cabling. I moved more into networking. Went and did a CCNA. Went and did a CCNP. Really got into networking. Got heavily into VoIP. And did that for a number of years as a technician. Then moved to managed network provider, or the first kind of MSP that I worked for, moving away from that kind of break fix professional services into an MSP. We provided managed network services. I ran a network team there, a NOC team for about 3 or so years. And then one day I got invited out by one of our sales guys because they were short on pre-sales people. And he's like, do you want to come to the sales meeting with me? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I went out and I listened to him and I did a bit of a presentation, did some discovery with him. And I walked away from that meeting thinking, man, I can do what you do so much better. And so I decided to move into sales. And so I moved from technical to sales and I went and worked for a large MSP here in Australia, doing sales. And they ended up getting acquired by Canon, the printer company. And um, after that, I shifted over to a different MSP, ended up running their go-to-market for a number of years. And then after being with them for about 4 years, and we did a bit of everything. We did hosting, we did telephony, just traditional support. I helped build out their cybersecurity offering, or MSSP services. We kind of had a bit of a challenge that kept coming up again and again, and that was with our cybersecurity stack. Email security was a big pain point. I'd go sit down with like a CEO or a CFO, and they'd be like, Dave, I love your team. I love that I call up and get to speak to the same techs. I love your responsiveness. I love that you've got a chat function. Love all of that. Love your QBRs. You probably sell to me a little bit too much, but generally love what you do. But if my receptionist gets one more email from me asking for a gift card, I'm going to get rid of you as an MSP. And so that kind of caused me to go out and look at what was going around, what was going on. And I got introduced to Avanan because of that. And Checkpoint, I got introduced after the acquisition by Checkpoint, and their tech really, really interested me. And so we had a conversation, and I ended up joining to start them off in the Asia Pacific region. And then about 8 months, 9 months in, there was an opportunity to take over the global MSP team, given my MSP background. And I jumped at it and I haven't looked back since. And as you mentioned, I'm based out of Australia at the moment, but given that I'm running the global team, the time zones are a little bit odd. I mean, it's about 4 a.m. at the moment. Um, So we've actually decided to relocate to the US. So I'm only in Australia for another 2 weeks, or a
Oh,
little under 2 weeks.
where are you going to land in the US? Where are you gonna park?
So we're landing in Utah. So we're trading the tropical beaches of Queensland for the dry, mountainous, snowy climate of Utah. So it's uh it's going to be a big change, but we decided if we were going to relocate countries, well, my wife and I with our 3 kids and our dog, that we wanted to go have a completely different experience. And so, yeah, we're trading up the tropical beaches for snow-capped mountains.
Okay, sounds good. Let me be one of the very first people to welcome you to the great United States of America. It's an interesting time, globally, but also here in this country. So you'll be right in the thick of, what fun is in store for the end of the year. But all good. Welcome.
Thank you. We're definitely excited to be over there. And
Awesome.
I'm very excited for less 4 a.m. meetings, that's for sure.
Yes, I can imagine. As somebody who's done that on the opposite side, I feel the pain. And yeah, sleep is important. At some point, you definitely need to like keep the cycle going rather than breaking it up. But you know all about that. So you literally grew up in the sandbox. That's what I like to call MSP land. You know the pain, the struggle, all the day-to-day, challenges, right? That like ultimately plague, the industry. Uh it's a good industry, but it's a difficult business. Like and quite frankly, it's a difficult business because I mean, I can't help but bring it up because it's like still going on to some degree. But like when you have things like a global IT outage that shows up on every news channel that you can get a hold of, and every Facebook ad and news site, and like that's some people would say that's a bad day for everyone in the sandbox, for many reasons, right? Like black eye, but also like all of the people who had to work around the clock to remediate that issue. But also, like, big picture, it's an industry that kind of gets a bad rap, right? Like if it's broken, you're getting people yelling at you all the time. And if it's not broken, don't call me, I won't call you, right? So not exactly, an industry where everybody's giving you the pizza party and the beer either. So one of the reasons why is more and more technology means things, even though to the user may not seem this way, get more and more complex. But like the bad guys also are getting smarter, right? Like it's becoming more and more difficult to like, keep the doors locked and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that. I mean, devastating what's happened over the weekend, of course, but and we haven't seen something of this scale. But as you would know, working for an MSP and working with MSPs, this style of issue that you just don't foresee, that you can't really budget for, they happen. P zeros happen. I mean, one of the reasons what kind of prompted me to look at the market a little bit more when I stepped out of working for an MSP was, to be honest, during kind of the COVID era of kind of 2020, 2021, I got sick of exchange vulnerabilities. I swear every other day there was a new vulnerability that we had to deal with. And it just completely, we would have our quarterly planning, we would have our, big rocks or strategic goals we would try and execute on, and our targets we would try and execute on. But then there would be a new vulnerability. And it felt like during that time there was a new vulnerability every other week that we had to deal with. It would just completely derail us. And it's just a part of being working for an MSP, but it's why SMBs need MSPs so much, is because they just don't have the skills or the budget to hire people internally to be able to address them in the way, those issues in the way that they need to be addressed. And we see now, with vulnerabilities, you can go buy vulnerabilities on the dark web. Like it's easy to do, and the threat actor groups that we're seeing, it's not your traditional kind of, I'm a, sometimes you see it, but I'm a disgruntled ex-employee, I'm a disgruntled teenager sitting in my mum's basement trying to wreak havoc. It's sophisticated groups and organizations that are trying to target vulnerable businesses. And it's not just a matter of, I'm going to go target, the Fortune 50, the Fortune 500. I'm going to go target SMBs, because then we're less likely to have as sophisticated security, or to have somebody who can deal with the challenges that I'm going to raise. And they'll go, spend their money and buy their vulnerability, and then they've got a timeline. They've got to, get a return for their investment. And so they'll wait to the ideal moment and they'll execute on it. And, then the whole IT industry, jumps and responds and says, okay, let's go patch the vulnerability. Let's go find every server
It's
that's
amazing. The way you're talking is it's like a business, right? This is the same terms, the same thinking, the same strategy that we all have, right? Like, hey, how long is it going to take me to get a return on my investment? I'm going to go and make it, buy something from a marketplace, and then try and implement that. And how long does it take for, like, effectively you're running a business plan just on bad things.
You're 100% right. I mean, there's been a few conversations I've been involved in recently where you're almost to the stage where you could refer to them as like a dark MSP. Like, they are they operate with goals. They have technical staff they need to pay. They've got leadership teams, these threat actor groups. They're sophisticated, and so they need to make money. If they didn't, if they couldn't
Dark
make money, they wouldn't be in
MSP.
existence.
We should coin that phrase. It's like, hey, it's the inverse of what you do. It's the people that make your job, like, who are fighting you from the other side.
Yeah, that's right. The Negro
Shadow
MSP.
MSP.
Yeah.
A little reference there from our favorite Netflix show. Okay, so that being said, let me ask you a question, just because you've been in the sandbox and you've been there. Why is it when Checkpoint, not Checkpoint, but checkpoints, looking at the news and they're like, when those guys are down, or when the big guys have an outage, or when Amazon or Azure go down, they're like, well, they're the big guys. Let's just sit back and, no big deal. And it's like, but if anything else that's not the big guy's name, let's say Microsoft, then like the world is ending. Why is that? Is that just a perception thing? Why does the end customer have that idea?
I think there's probably two parts to that. I mean, the first part is that, when Microsoft goes down, as an example, it affects everyone. But there's also an element of there's only so much you can do. We are really reliant on Microsoft. Most organizations in the world, and if it's not Microsoft, it's Google. If you head into certain parts of the world, you'll step outside the Microsoft and Google world. But realistically, we're all reliant on the hyperscalers and these hosters to run our day-to-day business. And so when there is an issue, generally they respond pretty quickly. I mean, you look at Microsoft 365 as an example. When there is an issue, and it pops up occasionally, they'll generally resolve it within half an hour or something like that. And I found working for an MSP that customers were a little bit more accepting, because they were like, well, if I can't send an email because 365's down in my region, none of my customers can either. So I'm not the kind of standalone. Whereas when it comes to a third-party product where you've maybe made a decision between A and B, or you were looking at product A, B, and C, and you went with C, and C has a problem, but all of your customers are running product B and product A, so they're still operating, it makes it a little bit more personal for the organization. And so I think that from a customer point of view, working with an MSP, there's less leeway for them because it's based off a decision that you've made.
That's fair. To a large degree, that's fair. But do I get to relabel it 364 instead of 365? Is that okay?
I make that joke regularly.
Okay.
No, probably.
Well, we're doing the same jokes. I love that. We should sit at the same bar stool. Okay. That being said, just big picture though, I think that after this past weekend, a little bit more due diligence probably goes into vendor selection now, right? And like maybe they actually read the agreement this time, and they probably ask themselves, what's the backup plan of the backup plan? Because this one was a big one. Like, you know what I mean? I saw a joke online, one of the memes. It's like, Y2K came 24 years later than we thought. And then
I
had
think I
the
saw
blue
that.
screen. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty good. Anyway, we'll put that off to the side, but couldn't help but talk current events. Let's talk Avanan, right? Like, I think a lot of people have heard the name Checkpoint, because of just it's out in the tech sphere, right? Big name, but I'm not sure they've heard the name Avanan. So maybe you could give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Avanan came about in around 2016, 2015, 2016, and our founders got together because they saw a big migration from on-premise mail to 365.
Hmm.
But the architecture of how email security works, of using a gateway, changing MX records, has been around and been the reference architecture for 20 odd years. Like it was the way to do it. You'd go in, when you had an on-prem mail server that you could go in and pat on a Friday night and pray over to say, please don't go down over the weekend. I really don't want to come in and deal with it. You would have a gateway that sat up on top of it. You change your mail records or MX records. So the mail flow went into the gateway, scanned it. If it was okay, went through to the mail server. If not, it blocked it. Did great for spam, did great for malware. But we started seeing this huge migration to 365. And 365 had some native security, but people weren't quite comfortable with it to start off with. And so they retained their gateway. And a lot of the times they virtualized their gateway, but it was the same architecture of change an MX record, mail flows in. If it's okay, it goes through to 365. The architecture didn't quite translate, or doesn't quite translate as well to cloud as it did for on-premise mail. You can get around the gateway by sending an email to the on Microsoft domain. It doesn't quite address the more advanced phishing attacks, things like that. It's scanning inbound email. It's quite complicated to set up scanning for outbound email. And if you want to scan internal email, you've got to route mail out of the gateway, then back in just to send to somebody in your organization. So it didn't quite work well. And so our founders decided to integrate directly with 365 using APIs. And so they created the first API-based email security tool where when the email came in, it went through the native Microsoft security, but then using the Microsoft Graph API, it would remove it from the inbox once it already arrived. And it was quite good for anti-phishing. That changed the industry, was a fundamental pivot point. We now see lots and lots of API-based email security tools in the market. Gartner even now has terms to refer to them as ICES or CAPES, C-A-P-E-S, to refer to that type of API-based email security. We started to grow, got our first 100 customers or so, but early on in our journey, we realized there was a bit of a pitfall between moving from a gateway that was prevention first versus an API tool which was doing detection and remediation. So our founders got together, they spent about 12 to 18 months on R&D, really, really focused in on how to address this. And they created what they called inline API. And what that was the ability to do prevention of malicious emails, but inside of 365 instead of being a gateway on the outside. So you'd be able to prevent malicious emails without changing MX records. So 30 to 60 seconds to set up, out of the box doing protection on inbound, outbound, and internal, but all inside of 365. And then they patented that approach as well. So that if you made a change to your policies on how you wanted to handle a phishing email or a spam email or a bit of malware, it would automatically make any required changes to mail flow rules inside of 365. Very, very simple setup. That patented prevention approach became the catalyst to our growth and our core product. So we from there, we started to grow exponentially. We're now close to about 30,000 customers. We're working with between 2,500 and 3,000 MSPs globally. And we've just continued to be noticed by industry analysts around the quality of what we're doing from a product point of view. That approach of being able to do inline API was one of the big reasons that Checkpoint looked at acquiring us. So Checkpoint, in 2021, we got acquired by Checkpoint and we became a Harmony email and collaboration. So Harmony's Checkpoint's suite of product that protects the end user. So email, mobile, endpoint, and SASE. Shout out to Perimeter 81, who recently joined us to be our SASE, our SASE product. And so that we protect the whole end user suite now as a part of that. And so since we've been acquired by Checkpoint, it's honestly, I've seen a few different, been involved with a few different acquisitions from an MSP point of view. I've obviously seen different vendors handle acquisitions. Checkpoint's done this one extraordinarily well. They kind of largely left us alone. We brought us into the company. They invested so that our development and our R&D would continue to increase, and it has. I mean, we released something like between 70 and 80 feature releases last year to our email security product. The majority of them got applied to our existing partners without an additional cost. I think last weekend we released 5 different product releases. Again, majority of them, no additional cost to our partners. We just released them. So we got acquired by Checkpoint, and we've continued to grow since then. We're now part of Checkpoint's Harmony Suite, as I said. And then what's happened from there is that with the growth that we've had as Avanan and what we've been doing in the managed services space, and with a bit of influence from Perimeter 81 joining Checkpoint late last year, Checkpoint has got the MSSP bug. They are starting to see what can potentially be done in this market, how many MSPs are out there and how many MSPs that we're working with that maybe we weren't just providing MSP style services to. So late last year, Checkpoint launched, after taking a lot of learning from what we did at Avanan, Checkpoint launched their MSSP program and are continuing to develop it now to make all of the Checkpoint products available in a single pane of glass multi-tenanted portal, or consumption per user per month billing, which is simple and easy to use for MSPs. So be it email, endpoint, mobile, SASE, cloud protection, and there's more to come in the near future as well. So very, very exciting time to be in the email security space because it's such a needed thing for MSP, and now to be a part of the wider Checkpoint because there's such a heavy investment going on for supporting MSSPs.
No, I mean, so let me just try and put that together real quick. So are you responsible specifically for the email security component in the stack of this multi-product bundle now? Or how does like as an MSP, or you're saying MSSP, it's not a huge jump between the two depending on who you're talking to, but so if I come to you as an MSP and I'm like, hey, I'm security focused MSP even, right? Let's just say that. And I see that you have these 5, 6, 7, 8 things, right? Let's call it your 365 bundle for lack of a better explanation.
Yeah.
I come to you, like, is that what your team manages from an MSSP standpoint? Or are you still working specifically on the one component from the email security side?
Yeah, great question. So we're still working on the one component from the email side, but as we launch this wider MSSP program, we're naturally getting a lot more questions about the other products. My team specifically are email experts. They're probably not the best person to ask around, some of the new features of what's going on in mobile or what's going on with SASE. And so what product Checkpoint has inside of the organization is we have our product specialists because we have so many different products. So we're the email product specialists. And then if there's a question about SASE, we'll go grab one of the Perimeter 81 team as an example, or what we now call Harmony SASE, and we'll bring them in and to be able to have that conversation. So you're speaking with the expert on the product.
Got it. No, it makes sense. I mean, listen, this is one of the, as you're going down the path of a large company who has multiple parts to it, right? I used the quotations earlier because, yes, from the MSP side, we've seen, other companies, right? And like maybe it didn't, really go too hot, but, that's history, right? Hopefully that different approach here. So with all, like, to your point, there's a lot of email security products. Some have taken a similar approach. Obviously, you have a patent, so not the exact one, but let's just say the API approach, right? So, like, why would I as an MSP, security focused MSP, MSSP, let's just bundle all that together for sake of argument. Why pick this solution versus the other API driven solutions out there?
Yeah, great question. So the big one for us is that ability to do inline and to have the inline automated. If you're going to rely on an API-based email security tool, it's really seen as a supplement. And so you're going to end up needing to either still have a gateway to try and do prevention, or you're going to need to rely on Microsoft Defender, but you're going to end up managing 2 portals to be able to do it. With us, because we are inline and we have that patented prevention approach, you can just rely on us to be able to do it. Now, you don't need to disable the native Microsoft security. In fact, we recently released a secondary patent or got a secondary patent approved for what we call Unified Digest, where you can actually manage Defender from our portal. So be that blocking potentially compromised accounts, releasing malicious emails. We can overwrite when Microsoft has false positives or false negatives. And we even release the ability to do what we call Unified Digest, where if it gets blocked by Microsoft, it'll show in our portal as well. And from an end user point of view, the daily digest that they get that's showing all the blocked emails will show what we're blocking and what Microsoft's blocking. But it'll be one single experience for the end user. and they'll be able to, whether they can release it or not, the policies are actually set in our portal and not in Microsoft's. And so we released a patent on that as well. So that ability to do inline, meaning it's not just doing phishing, but it's doing malware sandboxing, it's doing URL rewriting, those features that don't work unless you are pre-inbox, you're going to get with us without needing a secondary solution. But then as well as that being connected into Microsoft to the level that we are around that unified digest is going to just make your life easier because you're not going to need to jump between the two portals and your end users are going to get a very seamless experience.
Interesting. So obviously, there's a very big push to at least get, I mean, maybe you've heard it. I've definitely heard it many times, to get users to at least Microsoft 365, like business premium, right? That's where these additional security things just to some degree, people don't even realize they're there. And then they're like, why am I paying for premium versus standard versus basic? I digress. The Microsoft people seem to think that while underutilized, these security features are good enough. I assume your product says otherwise, right? Like, what are the enhancements that you bring that the off-the-shelf Microsoft, security component doesn't do well?
Yeah, great question. So the first and foremost thing is around catch rate. So you're right. Microsoft, if you go to E5, if you go to Defender Plan 2 or Business Premium, you are going to get a step up from the standard email security offering. It's still not easy to manage, and it still does take quite an effort to be able to go in and configure it. But the catch rate's still not quite where it needs to be as well. And we've seen this with SMBs, we've seen this with large enterprises where there was a large enterprise customer that we worked with. They had a full team dedicated to configuring Defender. They got it to about a 99% efficacy rate, but that 1% that's still getting through to the end user, that's still going to cause a problem, particularly if you've got a large number of emails coming through. And so we're not going to tell you to turn off the native Microsoft security tools. We want to work with them, but we want to be able to address what Microsoft's missing. In fact, our engines are tuned to pick up what Microsoft misses. And so this could be advanced threats that are, give you an example. It could be a malicious link that's hidden inside of a PDF. We're going to be able to pick that up when Microsoft's missing it. It could be malicious QR codes embedded into emails where we're going to go in and be able to pick it up. But it's that ability to pick up what Microsoft's missing. And because of the architecture of where we sit, we're the last stop before the inbox. So if we see it, it means it's been missed by Gateway. It means it's been missed by Microsoft because the flow of the mail is that it goes through them, then comes to us, then hits the inbox. And so one of the best ways and things that we say when people are looking at our product is, it takes 30 to 60 seconds to implement. It's extremely easy, and you can implement it in monitoring only, which means it has zero impact to your existing mail flow. But put it in there, leave it in there for 2 weeks on a free trial, and just let it show you everything that's getting missed by the existing email security. If you want to run it with your customers, you can generate a co-branded report at the end of it to show them everything that the existing email security is missing. And then just because we are very confident in our catch rate, we're running a promo for MSPs at the moment where we say, put it in play, leave it there for 2 weeks. If it doesn't catch more than your existing email security, I'll give you a PlayStation 5.
Wow. What, really? A PlayStation 5?
Yeah. It used to be an Apple Watch, but we changed it to a PlayStation 5 because we thought partners would enjoy that more than an Apple Watch.
Okay. I mean, it's a nice offer. I like that. Definitely get ahead of Christmas presents for sure. That, or maybe you're just a gaming person. When you say it takes 60 seconds to deploy, I don't know, seems a little bit markety. How, like, be honest, nothing takes 60 seconds. It takes more than 60 seconds to sign in to Office 365. So, like, what is this 60-second, pitch here?
7 clicks, 8 clicks if you've got a pop-up blocker. So basically what it is, the way that it works on the back end is that and this is kind of where our patent sits, is that when we integrate, we actually pull down an enterprise application from the Azure Marketplace, which sits inside the 365 tenancy. So the deployment that you're actually doing is just giving permissions for that to be deployed. Everything else is automated. So that's why it's so quick to set up. Now, when it sets up in monitoring. It's in monitoring only. And so what happens is it pulls down, it goes into monitoring only. It does a learning mode over the first up to 48 hours. Generally, with smaller customers, it's only a couple of hours. And what that does is it does a retroactive scan of the last 13 months of metadata. So it can build up profiles on different people. So it can establish, I log in at this time, I email this person, this is the type of language, establish like a social profile or style so that we can understand how people work so that our AI can then decide what's malicious and what's not. It'll do that over the first couple of hours, and then from there, it's good to go. Now,
I see.
to do a full and so the marketing is 30 to 60 seconds to deploy. A full setup, that's when you're going to go in and need to set up your policies and things like that. That's where the more time's going to come into play. That's going to take you a bit more time.
Okay, so the behind this sentence is it's prepackaged. Effectively, you're just plugging in the electricity to this ready to go machine, if you would, right? It's virtual, it's an app, but I'm just using it for explanation purposes. And you got to just let it run and see what it tells you, right? And then like there's a little bit more setup involved after that, but like to get it just to the ignition point, you've kind of made it Fisher Price is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. It's easy to plug in off the shelf, and it's going to give you just plug it in, put it in, be able to generate your reports to be able to say, okay, what's it missing? What do I have any active compromised accounts? Who's getting phished? That type of stuff.
So okay, you're pulling it down from the Azure Marketplace. Is it actually running in like a VM in Azure, or it's literally sitting inside of your just normal 365 tenant subscription? Nothing else is needed.
Yeah, so it's not a VM or anything like that. It's just running inside your 365 subscription.
Okay, well, that's cool. One less thing to worry about because Microsoft loves to charge for extra things if they can, right? Like everybody else. And then like this all ties back to your point, like this centrally managed portal somewhere, right? Like you said, it's multi-tenanted and like the MSPs can manage it all from one place. So like, how does that look? Like, do you need apps or any of this other 365 stuff that you have to do in order for Microsoft stuff to work, or is this separate?
No, this is separate. This is separate. So the flow, you would get access to our MSP portal before you would actually deploy it. Because what you do is when you would give you access to the MSP portal, you'd run up yourself. If you're running it up for yourself, apply your NFR licenses, and then you'd basically go in and do that 30 to 60-second deployment, those 7 clicks, 8 clicks if you've got a pop-up blocker. And then they would do everything that we've described around the enterprise application. But you would get to that by being in our MSP portal.
Got it. And then like the actual user experience, right? The person that sits in between the chair and the keyboard, right? Like they're in their mailbox. They're like, oh, this is actually junk. Are they just using the native right-click junk block, or like what's their experience from a management standpoint?
Yeah, great question. So we are integrated with a native Microsoft report phishing button. And that was intentional. We didn't want to roll out a third-party application into people's Outlook. Outlook is slow enough as it is.
Sure.
So we integrate with the native button. Now, from the other part of the end user experience really comes down to, if they want a daily digest, do they want to get alerted every time an email is blocked, or do they just want to get a digest every hour or so, or do they just want to log into an end user portal to be able to view the malicious blocked emails? The workflows really can change depending on the customer requirement. And because we do work with SMBs and right up to enterprises, I think our largest customer has a couple of 100,000 users. You can get quite granular in the way that it's set up. So if you want to have a specific workflow for your executive team, but then a different workflow for your finance team, and then a different workflow for your tech team, for example, you can set up all the different workflows and stack them together so that based off the requirements, they could have a different experience. So let's say, for example, that the finance department is heavily attacked. So you could set up a workflow that says the finance or a policy, the finance department will be alerted every time a malicious email is blocked. But if they want to release it, it has to be approved by an admin first, so that they would go and say, I want to release this email for reason X, Y, Z. That then alerts the admins or the MSP who looks at it and says, okay, yeah, that looks okay. Let's release it. Whereas you could say for the IT team, maybe you're a little bit more confident with them. You say they'll get alerted, but they have the permissions to, hopefully, they have the permission to release those emails. Or let's say they have permission, they can go and view and spam emails, so they can release phishing emails. But if it's a high confidence bit of malware, no, they cannot release it. So you can get very granular into what that experience is like for an end user.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, because like, especially like a lot of emails still can now consumed on the mobile operating systems, right? iOS, Android, maybe they're native mail, maybe it's the Outlook app on the device, whatever, so like just trying to train people. I was just talking to somebody the other day. They're like, how do I block, can you add this to the block list? I was like, yeah, right click, junk, block me. I was like, right there, right? Like, why are you asking? But like even like just the basic Microsoft look and feel, but I digress. And then like from a program standpoint, okay, all right, you get an MSP, they buy in, they're like, yeah, don't want all my eggs like just totally relying on Microsoft. Okay, we're gonna put something to work, on top or in conjunction with Microsoft. Fine. Like, how does the MSP program work? Is it a term? Is there a minimum? Like, do they have to commit to a certain like tier? Like, just kind of explain what that looks like.
Yeah, not a problem. So consumption based, no lock-in per user per month, billed at the end of the month based on actual usage. And a user for us is a licensed 365 user. So what that means is that the number of 365 licenses you have is going to mirror the number of licenses you have with us. If you have shared mailboxes that do not have an Exchange Online license, we'll still protect them, but we're not going to charge for them. So you could have 50 users and then 10 shared mailboxes that don't have an Exchange Online license. For us, that's only 50 users. We will protect the shared mailboxes. We won't charge for them. We do have tiering as well. So the more that you consume as an MSP, the cheaper your buy price becomes. And we do have the ability, if you want to start off at a higher tier, if you want to commit to achieving a certain number over the first 6 to 12 months, because you want a bit of a ramp up period because you're shifting over from a gateway or something like that, we can look at those and we do them quite regularly with a number of partners. But there's no term, there's no lock-in. We understand, and particularly for myself coming from an MSP where the last MSP that I worked at, we stopped selling contract terms. We actually moved to month with a 60-day notice period because it just removed a barrier to sales as an MSP. We understand that's how MSPs work, so we're trying to make it our product easy to consume and easy to build.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish everybody took that stance because, quite frankly, most don't. So that's a positive. When you say like consumption based, meaning like they have to go and turn on that tenant, and then you're going to like scan their users, and then based on their licensed users, that would automatically update the consumption.
Similar, yeah. So basically what happens is we take a snapshot every day at a certain
Okay.
time every day. And so if you've had, let's say you turn it on the 15th of the month, or you apply a license, because every time you turn a customer on, the first 2 weeks are free. So
Oh,
if you don't apply a license, so everyone has what we call a POC or a proof of concept or a POV, a proof of value, or a trial, whatever you want to call it. Every time you create a customer, it starts off in one of those. And so if you don't want to license it for those first 2 weeks, that's fine. You don't have to. You'll get access to the product to do that and set up policies and things like that. We start counting consumption when you apply a license. And if you apply that license on the 15th of the month, we're going to take a snapshot every day of how many users there are, and we'll bill you at the end of the month based on the number of days that you were active. So let's say that you had the 100 users every day for those 15 days, you'd get billed for half of a month. And
got it.
it works on the opposite as well. So if you turned off halfway through the month, you'd only get billed for half the month.
Got it. So the reason it's doing this is because the idea is that you may be adding and removing users.
Correct.
Got it. So let me put a wrinkle in there for you. Let's say, because with NCE with Microsoft, right? Like once I buy licenses, I'm kind of stuck at least for probably a year, right? So let's say I bought 50 licenses, but I only actually assigned 30 of the 50 to actual users, and then 20 are just sitting there waiting for me to decide what I want to do with them. Do I get billed for the 20, or is it just the 30 users?
Great question. It's just the 30. So the second requirement, so we look at if they've got we look at if they have a 365 license, but they also have to have an active mailbox attached to it.
I see. Okay. Got it. Well, that's great because we wish Microsoft took your approach, right?
And it's probably worth mentioning to that as well. And this is something I didn't touch on when we spoke about the other API vendors, but our licensing under the Checkpoint, the new branding with Checkpoint were Harmony, Email, and Collaboration. And the reason, or HEC for short, the reason it's called collaboration is as part of our licensing, we're not just protecting on email, we're also doing protection on Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Box, Dropbox, Citrix ShareFile, Google Drive, and Slack. All as a part of the same portal, all as a part of the same per user license.
So wait a minute, that's included.
Yes, that's included. So if you're an MSP that comes and works with us, you come or wants to work with us, you set up that 2-week POC. You can go deploy it to your 365 mail, but then you can deploy it to Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Box, and Dropbox if you want to, and the other lists that I can rattle off in one go, but I can't name the individual ones. So you could go deploy it to those as a part of that POC, and we're going to count the users as long as it's the same email address across the applications, that's going to count as one user. So a lot of our customers and our MSPs, they are protecting on OneDrive and SharePoint as well, because we do see a lot of attacks where people try and put malware into SharePoint, or they want to be able to rewrite URLs inside of Teams. We've seen a big uptick in what I call BCC, or business communication compromise, where people are getting phished by Teams. Somebody will get access to your 365 environment, sit in a group chat, and then just wait, and then post a malicious link in that's going to go to a phishing site. So we do see that. So protecting on that entire 365 suite is an important part of it as well.
Oh, it's pretty neat. Like that was like a really big bonus to the whole conversation, right? We were talking about email, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but by the way, here's everything else. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. It's a little bit more involved. That's awesome. Because I'll be honest with you. Teams is a good one, right? Like you don't think that there's a bad guy sitting inside your team's organization, right? Like you just assume it's all internal people. And then OneDrive, right? Like especially when your attachments are automatically saving to OneDrive, for example, because like by default it does this until you turn it off. People forget that information lives on past your inbox for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a big uptick in it. And the ease of phishing people by Teams is scary. All you
Because you trust it, right? You think that it's
Yeah,
just yeah.
right. And that's a trend you see when there's new technology, people just assume that it's safe. They just assume Teams is protected. It's like, well, actually, it's kind of not. Microsoft's safe. It's like, well, unless you go configure something, it's actually not.
I've got into like epic battles with people over the Microsoft security score, and I'm like, you got to do a really lot of work to get to like a security score past 70. And by the way, is the experience very good? But after you get past that point, I'm not so sure. But like when you just turn on a new 365 account from scratch, security scores really low. And like I asked myself the question, well, if you know that by default it's really not secure, why is that the default? Why don't you start them at 50 or 60 or 70? You know what I mean? Like, why is it 20 or 30? And I guess the answer is, well, because you could decide to do whatever you want. And it's like, but like the average SMB company probably doesn't know what you're talking about. They just get their email, they're happy, it works, awesome. And then like it's 20.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you touched on a really good point there as well. And something that I've again found working at an MSP is you've got on one side of the spectrum, you've got extremely secure. We could talk defense level security. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got usability and user experience. And you've got to find as an MSP, you've got to be able to find the balance between those two. You obviously want to lean more towards security, but if it's a frustrating experience for end users, they're not going to stay with you. They're not going to buy the products. And so it's being able to find that balance is really, really critical because, sorry, let's be honest, if we want to make networks 100% safe, let's just remove the users. That's a
Right?
great way to be safe. Yeah.
Well, that would defeat the purpose, I think. But I'm with you. Well, I mean, listen, you've heard of, certain companies that literally have a air gap network for certain things, right? Like it's just completely never touched internet. They're separate from the regular computers with email and like, for whatever, like, I don't know, nuclear power plant, who knows, right? Something like this. That's not cost effective to the average everyday company. No, like you can't have completely separate systems on running on completely separate networks everywhere because Probably couldn't afford it in most cases.
And nor would your users necessarily want to experience that as well. I mean, we're taking, in a lot of cases, again, especially as an MSP, you're taking not just your key contact on a journey, you're taking the end users on a journey so
That's
that
true.
they understand cybersecurity. Now, that's getting a little bit easier than it was maybe 5 years ago because there's been so many large scale breaches across the world. Like cybersecurity is now something that people talk about in their day-to-day life.
It's
You know,
true.
I was sitting down, my sister-in-law, we just had some family over because we're moving, and she took a phone call that was probably from her bank, and the bank called up and was like, "Hey, they spoke about a few things." She's like, "Look," the bank said, "Oh, before I go into this, can I just confirm, your date of birth, or this?" And she's like, "No." So I don't have any verification of where you're from. And I was sitting listening, I was giggling a bit about her response and how brutal she was to the bank owner or to the banker. But it was a good example of the fact that in day-to-day lives, people are becoming a little bit more security aware. And so taking them on those end users on that journey now, there's an expectation around security, whereas maybe 5 or 10 years ago there wasn't that expectation, but now there is.
Well, I think the aptitude of that person varies, and depending on many things, age, aptitude of like just computer technology in general, right? Like, you always hear about the scams, like Microsoft calling you for saying that they're going to need to remote into your computer, right? Or something like this. And it's like,
Yeah.
I can't get Microsoft to take my call, let alone give me a call. So I don't know what you're talking about. Why would they call me and tell me they're going to remote in?
Yeah, tell me about this new hyper-focused Microsoft managed service that calls me because there's one little error on my PC. I'm so interested. I'd love to sell that.
No, but like people do get fooled by this. I mean, like it happens all the time. Could be a whole nother hour of just that. Awesome. So, no, I can sign up as an MSP. I get access to the program. I have this proof of concept period for every account. Consumption-based billing in arrears, right? Like you're gonna at the end of the month tell me what I used from the month prior. It sounds like no minimums, pay as you go, no long-term contracts. I can turn on, turn off, centrally managed. How does tech support work?
Yeah, great question. So we've and quite an exciting time actually. So we've got a 24/7 support team, and we are actually about to go live with now a dedicated MSP support team as well. So we're actually separating our support out from our enterprise team just because we want to make sure that our MSPs are getting the level of support that we want. So yeah, we've got support APAC, EMEA, and in the Americas. Reach out and our team will be able to support you 24/7.
That sounds great to me. That's the right answer right there. Awesome. And then like during the beginning part of this, like is there implementation help for the 7 clicks, maybe 8 with the silver pop-up blocker, or
Yeah.
like how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got partner success managers who can help you with your onboarding, who want to train you on best practice. Once you're on board, we have a monthly product roadmap call. When we're releasing as many features as we are, it's good to be aware of what's coming. And our SEs, a lot of the time, will want to help you with your first couple of deployments anyway, just to make sure that you are comfortable. So as you reach out to our team, and they'll be able to help you with that and make you feel and make sure you're comfortable. And if you do have want some help selling on those first couple of conversations, my sales team can definitely help with that as well.
Awesome. Well, I mean, listen, sounds like there's no reason not to even just look at it at this point. I haven't run into a speed bump yet, right? So it's like, hey, what do you got other than time, which we can all spend differently? Sounds like I'm not going to put myself into a corner and unexpectedly, and then all of a sudden I'm in a 8-year contract, and I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And look, and if I'm completely full of it about the quality of the product, I'll give you a PlayStation 5.
And the PlayStation, like, listen, you know what? I might just sign up and see if I can get the PlayStation 5. I probably won't because it probably works, but what I got to lose. Um, David, this has been awesome. I love hearing from people who started off in the trench with everybody else and like realize that they can help from the other side. The more people that do that, I think the better it gets for everybody because like no offense to the enterprise folks out there, square peg round hole in a lot of cases, and like we're just trying to teach you what we do rather than work together on what we need. I digress. Where do people find out more about the program, who to contact, check out some information, maybe talk to somebody?
Yeah, definitely. So reach out, go out to avanan.com. There's an MSP page. Jump on, submit your details and a suggested meeting time that would work well for you. My team will be in contact pretty quickly, and we'll be able to help out from there.
Awesome. Well, David, soon to be Utah resident, thank you for joining us. Too bad I'm flying the other way. Like as you're flying this way, I'm going this way. Got parties, and then I come back. So don't worry. Like I still got to go through global entry and TSA and customs and border protection, just like you're about to. Although I bet you won't get stopped as many times as I do, but that's we'll have that wager off to the side.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll see each other at a show real soon.
All good. Thank you very much for coming online, guys. This session was absolutely recorded. Other than the name, I didn't even really knew what Avanan did other than actually what we learned on today's session. So this is awesome. I love like barrier to entry, 0. As an MSP, this is like the bare requirements that I would look for in evaluating my vendor. So like strongly encourage you to just look. Maybe there's a PlayStation 5 in your future. What do you got to lose? So this session was absolutely recorded. You'll find it under mspinitiative.com under sessions. And again, we have all these other cool places like YouTube pages and podcast pages and all that stuff. But it's just real simple. Go under sessions, download, fast forward, rewind, reach out to David. And, if you aren't watching the video portion of this and you're like, who is this guy? You can, David, I think you know how to spell last name, Meister. So you can probably like, is this a real person? Not just like a bot? No, this is a real person. Can probably reach out to him. I'll answer some questions if you really, want to talk to the guy. Otherwise, we'll see you guys out and about. And thank you for joining in on this episode, David. I'm sure I will see you out in the near future. And first beer's on me.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.